1769, when monarchies were absolute, and the peasants who made up the majority of countries and did all the hard work were ignored. Ah yes, quite the perfect time. Oh, also some Corsican was born. His name was Napoleon Bonaparte or something. Not important. Well, a few years before this, France had bought the island. Yeah, it was an invasion. Anyways, Napoleon didn't much care for the French early on in his life, especially after being sent to Paris for schooling, where he was bullied and ignored for job opportunities despite his skills after graduation. I guess this poor Corsican will never get a break. Oh, the king's head just got chopped off. I'm sure it just did that. But anyways, we're in the French Revolution. Death to the nobility. This will be the beginning of a new, better, liberal France, and now there's the Reign of Terror. Thanks, Max. But in the meantime, Napoleon is able to rise through the ranks, and in 1793 is sent down to Toulon to deal with those pesky Brits, and is surprisingly successful, pushing them out of French territory. 2 years later, in 1795, royalists who wanted to return the Bourbons, the dynasty not the alcohol, to power attempted an uprising in Paris known as the 13 vending machine. Neapolitan ice cream here didn't much like kings, and I'm sure he would never declare himself emperor later, so he was tasked with dealing with these royalists, and yet another success. Napoleon was then left in charge of the small French army in Italy, tasked mainly with dealing with Piedmont, separating the Austrian and Piedmontese armies, taking them out one by one before marching almost all the way to Vienna, forcing them to surrender. Napoleon did a little invasion of Egypt, but it didn't go well, so he nobly escaped from Egypt in 1799 and helped launch a coup in Paris called the 18 Brumaire, making him one of 3 consuls, which is pretty much just a really powerful president. So like Trump. Eventually, he was able to consolidate his power and make him the only consul, meaning he was pretty much dictator. But despite that, he was actually a pretty good leader, returning Catholicism, which had been repressed during the Republic, even allowing freedom of religion, reforming the army, getting rid of corruption, improving infrastructure, and revitalizing the economy. The Austrians, seemingly not losing enough the first time, invaded French puppets in Italy in 1800, so Napoleon surprise attacked them through the Alps, initially losing, but we don't talk about that, before returning and defeating the opposing army, forcing the Third Coalition to surrender. With peace in Europe achieved for now, Napoleon declared himself emperor, completely insane, but yeah, this guy totally hated monarchies. He then started preparing for an invasion of Britain, but then the naval battle of Trafalgar occurred, where British Admiral Horatio Nelson destroyed the combined French and Spanish fleets. Russia and Austria soon joined the fight against France, with Napoleon capturing most of the Austrian army by simply marching, before chasing the Russian army to Austerlitz, where he was able to pin them against the ice and defeat them. With this victory, Napoleon created the Confederation of the Rhine, which I don't have time to explain, which replaced the 1,000-year-old Holy Roman Empire. Prussia, despite having an extremely outdated army, attempted to invade France and was beaten by a tiny army. The Russians then came to help their German companions, but were defeated after a long and bloody battle. So France and Russia agreed to set their differences aside and create an alliance. And Napoleon probably kissed the Russian Tsar, but we don't talk about that. Portugal, who had, I guess, been asleep since they were a British ally this whole time, then declared war on France in 1808 before quickly getting taken out. On his way back, Napoleon, as the French loved to do, overthrew the Bourbons, this time in Spain, and installed his brother Joseph as king. People don't tend to like being under the thumb of a foreign power, so the Spanish revolted against their French repressors. This caused a bit of a civil war, with the British backing the rebels, and the Austrians declaring war on the French, the Austrians instantly losing, because of course everything was coming up Milhouse for Napoleon, besides that whole war in Spain. So it's time to do something stupid and invade Russia. Napoleon invaded Russia in 1812, giving chase to the Russians who burned everything so the French couldn't live off the land. Despite that, the French would soon enter Moscow, where Napoleon realized that winter was setting in, so he began a retreat out of hostile territory. French forces dwindling while the Russians picked them off and more countries joined the coalition. After regrouping in Germany, Napoleon was served a crushing defeat in Leipzig, continuing to be chased back to France, where he is forced to abdicate in 1814. But we don't talk about that. Napoleon was able to keep his position of Emperor of Elba, this tiny island, and he was a good leader of the island, just like France, but he wanted more. So, he returned to France and overthrew the new Bourbon king, with the people's support, but not the support of other governments who then declared war on him, and he attempted an invasion of Belgium, but unfortunately for him, he lost at the Battle of Waterloo, so he was exiled once again to an island in the middle of nowhere where he would die in 1821. But thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe to Blue Bomb. That's at BlueBomb01. Oh, and here are my sources.